It says we are live. Now I've got the chat up, buddy. We'll kick things off, and I've got an invite waiting for Simon when he gets up. So I'm not sure when we're going to see him. This time, what is it? Daylight saving bloody bullshit between us and the UK. Yeah, I can't remember what time he's going to be on. Whether he's going to be on now or later when we finish. How are you?
Oh, doing good. Yeah, no, it's really been a nice weekend. A lot of blue sky. Got the fan on, and it's amazing how this year's flown by so quickly.
Oh, I can't wait for a Christmas break, buddy. Hey, I just want
Yeah,
to touch base with you on a couple of things. Couple of comments passed on to me by a couple of people. We need to probably do a Rolling Stones show, a couple of Rolling Stones shows before the end of the year. Richard wants to come back on, so I'm trying to tee something up with him.
yeah.
So he wants to jump on board, and so we can finish that conversation and have a chat to him. There's a couple of things that he wants to talk about, so we'll basically give the floor to him.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The new Brian Jones documentary that's coming out, that's going to be pretty good. So I think that's going to come on Netflix. I don't know when, but obviously when that hits, when that drops, we should have a discussion on that, because basically it's a show, a presentation of your theory that Brian Jones was murdered.
Well, probably the best word to describe would be probably manslaughter. Yeah, not intentional.
It wasn't an accident.
It wasn't a homicide per se, premeditated. It was just a combination of lots of things. I've read about 6-7 books on it, but yeah, that'd be good. That'd be interesting. I mean, with how pathetic music is these days, you probably find over the next 10 years, and unfortunately with the legends, a lot of these legends dying, there's a renewed interest in some of these, not necessarily the legends, but probably the people that they were inspired by, the Brian Jones and T-Rex, and, where did this stuff come from?
I think what we also have to remember too, mate, is that the Brian Jones film, for example, that we've just been talking about, the director is interviewing and getting opinions of people that hung out with Brian during the time, like Cutler and that Prince dude, whatever his name is. So he's actually talking to people that knew Brian. So this is nothing like secondhand or third hand or fourth hand, not necessarily talking to some 25-year-old British journalist. He's actually talking to the cats that knew Brian. So that in itself is valuable. But also, you and I have always been a defender of the role of Brian Jones in the Rolling Stones. That he was the founder of the Rolling Stones, that he was the leader of that band for a long time, and indeed the main player in British blues. And that by itself deserves a pat on the back. Anybody that wants to articulate and maintain that fact, in my opinion, deserves a.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, he was definitely a heavyweight in that British scene, and he had all the connections too. So, and you mentioned it was Jimi Hendrix live at the Royal Albert Hall with bonus tracks. Is that right?
Yeah. So
when they say bonus tracks, is that bonus visual footage or just
visual?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think that he did "Sunshine of Your Love," and I want to see that live. I mean, it's on record, but if they showed that live, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, well, I think what we need to do, obviously, is we need to have a Jimi Hendrix show. So I'll certainly be looking forward to that. I know that you're a Hendrix nut, so that's going to be cool.
Yeah. We haven't really done a Jimi Hendrix show, have we? We just talked about him through other people.
We've not done a Hendrix show.
Oh, okay.
So that's something.
Like, if a documentary is well done, it's a real treasure. It's a real gem, because I've got videos in the past where you mentioned like second and third hand and acquaintances and former roadies, and they waffle on, and who's this guy and what's he talking about? What a waste of 2 hours that was.
I've seen the trailer, and the trailer's pretty good. I'll send you a link if you haven't seen it yourself. The trailer's pretty good. Yeah. Hey, Arvin, thank you for jumping on board. We've got Arvin, who's a regular contributor to the chat, jumping on board. So no, I'm looking forward to it. There's a couple of documentaries that I want to see. I want to see the one about the Ealing Blues Club, 60 steps, suburban steps or something, that Dave has mentioned that we need to see. I've seen the shorts to that, about the British blues scene. And he said we've got to see that. Actually, there's three. The Quiet One, which is the latest Bill Wyman documentary. We need to see that, and also the one about Laurel Canyon.
John Mayall.
Well, yeah, it's about the Laurel Canyon sound. The bird sound and Clapton and all these guys. Yeah. So that looks pretty cool as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and Mike Bloomfield, all those guys. I think I've been to the Laurel Canyon. I've been around there. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. Because apparently, that was a hotbed for music and creativity.
San Francisco, is that in the mountains, close to San Francisco?
Certainly the West Coast. LA. I don't know.
I think it might be San Francisco.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Someone in the chat might know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's good. Yeah.
So we'll just keep going until Simon jumps on. But John Dawson Winter the Third.
Yeah.
John Dawson Winter.
So we're jumping into Johnny Winter now?
Well, John Dawson Winter the Third.
Yeah.
Well, what a name. Davis Love the Third.
We came from a musical family like Mike Bloomfield. His parents played and church background, and it was just natural for these guys to play. It was like and what a place to be born, Beaumont, which is on the border of Texas and Louisiana. So surrounded by like-minded musicians and generations of blues and gospel and Zydeco and everything.
So I'm just going to interrupt, Carl. So Arvin's seen that movie about Laurel Canyon that we're talking about. He saw it yesterday and he says it's pretty good. So that's pretty good. That's a good thumbs up. So we look forward to that. So you don't have the chat up, so I might be interrupting you during your presentations, mate. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, tell us about Johnny Winter.
Well, I know him as well as I know a lot of other musicians. I'm not crazy about the guy in the sense I own all his records. I do own some of them, but I am aware of what he's brought to the table, and he's just another classic Texas guitar gunslinger. A heavyweight. And what's interesting about him is he was part of that late '60s scene. And he carried on through the 70s and 80s and toured till he died in 2014. So a very consistent, active blues player who also was clever enough to play blues rock, and played big stadiums and played all over the world and was revered by especially Europe. Europe loved him.
Yeah, I got into him quite late. I was well into my late 20s when I started listening to him. I got a copy of a cassette tape of Johnny Winter, his first album, the one that came out in '69.
Yeah.
And I'm yours and I'm hers and be careful with the fool. And I remember going, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And he certainly looked different, didn't he? He didn't look like the run-of-the-mill blues rock and roller, did he?
Well, him and his brother both suffered from albinism. So it's a rare condition where they are very sensitive to light. And so they have very pale skin. Their eyes squint and they have really white hair. He was definitely unique. But I saw the guy live and he was probably 50 kilos or maybe 80 pounds weight, just
wow,
rail thin. But the sound coming out was as big as Albert King.
Wow.
Unbelievable. It was some of the best guitar playing I've ever seen in my whole life. And I haven't seen as much as I should have, but from what I saw, he was probably top 3. He I don't like using this term, but I'm going to use it. For a white guy, he had that black sound down cold.
Look, I don't think there's a problem in you saying that, because a lot of people are on record saying when they heard Johnny Winter, they thought they were listening to a Black Cat.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. It's well known. It's well known.
Well, the reason I say that because I went to Austin and they have a street called 6th Street, which is full of bars and bands, and there was so many people murdering the blues, mainly white guys.
Yeah.
And it was refreshing to see someone like him playing it how it should have been played, which is respectful and authentic. You know, the turnarounds, the tone, the phrasing. I mean, he did do those extended solos and very rocky, but overall a really solid player.
Where did he get that authenticity from? Is that because he was listening to that music at a young age, or was he exposed to playing with some of these guys at a young age for this authenticity to seep through, or did he just get it?
Well, I worked in Beaumont where he was born, and Beaumont, there's certain cities in America where they have a majority black population. So he would have been surrounded by black people all the time. East Texas is real black.
So Arvin agrees with you. Arvin's seen him play too. So Arvin agrees with you that, yeah. So, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So he would have got that sound. I mean, he was, before he was signed with Columbia, which is an interesting story, he was, with a lot of those guys, playing on small labels and have small contracts and getting ripped off. But I have an album of all his early stuff, Roadrunner, some instrumentals, By the Light of the Silvery Moon, all these standards. And he was just a freak, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix, at an early age, just amazingly talented and proficient.
A prodigy.
So I didn't know this till today, and you mentioned that first album on Columbia, and my uncle wore the grooves out of that song, Be Careful with the Fool, which, by the way, had Tommy Shannon on bass, as we know, Tommy Shannon, who became famous again through Stevie Ray Vaughan. But because of the Fillmore sessions and befriending Mike Bloomfield, Mike Bloomfield did Johnny Winter a huge favor. He was jamming with Mike Bloomfield and asked to do a song on the what's that Mike Bloomfield Super Sessions or whatever it was called, Al Cooper.
Yeah.
And so it just so happened some Columbia executives were in the at the show, and he got a standing ovation. And they signed him up for 3 albums, $600,000, which was a massive advance in those days.
Wow.
So just through his friendship with Mike Bloomfield, I'm glad we're discovering this on the American Treasure series, because I didn't know. So because we talked about Mike Bloomfield 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And obviously Roy Buchanan. All these guys interlinked and intertwined. It was great. Now that I'm learning. So signed to Columbia is a huge deal. That's a massive record label. That's serious music. You know, Columbia people, it's out of New York. They're not mucking around. So, and I was going to mention too, another thing that got him a massive exposure, and I think that concert is just a gem, a hallmark as far as concerts are concerned, was Woodstock. Exposing CCR, Johnny Winter, Santana, 10 years after, was it Alvin Lee? Just 3 days of just an amazing lineup. But yeah. So
Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
All those people, all those people. So Johnny Winter was fortunate enough, I guess, to have almost 3 phases of his career. He had the late 60s run, and then he teamed up with his brother and did Rock and Roll Hoochie Coochie.
Yeah.
You know, he had a couple of big singles there, didn't he? A couple of big songs.
Yeah.
And my friend used to blast, is it Johnny Alive or Johnny's Back or something? And Johnny Be Good, you know, and they did Jumping Jack Flash and
Johnny Winter and Live.
That's it. Yeah. I personally, his vocals can be a bit tiring. You know, he's an interesting singer. But he's a great guitar player.
One of the things that amazes me about Johnny Winter is his ability to take a cover. Like he's obviously he loved the Rolling Stones because he's done Jumping Jack Flash, Stray Cat Blues, and what's that song off Goat's Head Soup? Something about the train.
Okay, yeah, I know the one.
And then on
Silver Train.
Silver Train, yeah. So because he apparently heard them recording that or playing that when they were recording the album, and then went and did that version of a song himself. But like Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, he did that live on that album that you're talking about. Johnny Be Good, yeah, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. No, he in that early 70s, he had some big albums, and he obviously too had his sound down pat from day one. You know, he favoured the Firebird. He had a finger picking style, and he had those big rock amps, those big Marshalls. I'm pretty sure he played Marshalls, didn't he? Was it Fenders?
Well, it's interesting that you should say that because I watched another YouTube show about 4 weeks ago, and they're talking about, amongst other things, Johnny Winter. Johnny Winter used a 4x10 Music Man because it had 120 watts. So he So loved the Fenders, but needed the extra, obviously, grunt. But what's really interesting, and I don't know if it's true, I'm just hearing some other cats saying it, but apparently everything was turned to 0 except for the treble and the volume, which was on 10.
So you had a real trebly sound, no bass.
Yeah.
Shit, must have been intense. Wow.
Yeah. So, and obviously playing through his Firebird, because he loved that. But what's really interesting about a Firebird, and I've only played them a couple of times. I've never gigged with a Firebird, but depending on what model Firebird, apparently they're quite trebly. They've got like a Telecasterish sound. Have you come across that?
Well, his famous quote was that he loved Gibsons. He wasn't a fan of the big humbuckers, and so the Gibsons the Firebird was the next best thing to not owning a Fender but sounding like a Fender, because the mini humbuckers were P90s. Is that right? So he got that trebly sound that it was almost a bit like those Guild guitars that Buddy Guy played. It was a happy medium between a Fender and a Gibson Les Paul. It was not that thick, luscious tone that the Gibsons have, not that bright surf guitar tone that Strats have, but in the middle. Kind of a mid-tone, I guess, a mid-tone. I'm still kicking myself and bring a Firebird back, but I still want to own one day. I think they're cool. But he's synonymous with that particular guitar, and I got a funny feeling, let's face it, he would have influenced Angus Young, a whole bunch of people, I reckon. His career coincided with ZZ Top, and those guys had a big fan base with bikers. Real kind of, not the rough crowd, but a real working class sound. Real
solid blue collar. Is that
big time?
Yeah.
You weren't seeing university guys with coffees and books listening to him. He was doing a lot of shows with some pretty heavy crowd.
Well, so for some of our North American fans in the chat, some of the guys watching, here in New Zealand, we've got this saying called pub rock. You'd go and watch a band play and you drink. So you'd classify a period of Johnny Winter in that category of people were going there to drink beer and watch a live show.
Yeah, he was basically pub rock, but so good, so tight, such a wide range of material that he played to bigger arenas. But he never sold out. I don't think.
No. I've got a copy of the DVD that I did a couple of years ago, Down and Dirty, and he's basically been looked after by a guy. They've got the tour bus, and he's still touring, and he's watching a whole lot of comedies. He loves comedies, in the back of the bus there, and he's talking, and he's wheezing, he's going, in between talking and stuff, and he's fidgeting because he's, given up the booze, given up the drugs. And he only did that recently, didn't he? It wasn't like Clapton where he gave up, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. I think he only gave up, a short time. Did you come across that in your research?
Well, he went through a heroin phase in the 70s, but he did an album called Still Alive and Well or something, which was basically his coming off heroin album. But he's probably, like a lot of guys, supplemented it or swapped it for booze, possibly. He's probably a big boozer.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
Probably a boozer to the end. Because that stuff he did later with Muddy Waters, which is groundbreaking and amazing, I'm pretty sure there's a glass of whiskey or something hanging around.
Well, yeah. Before we discuss that album, which is a landmark in my opinion, that album, it's just phenomenal. It's a masterpiece. Arvin's asking in the chat, Johnny Walker at Woodstock, was he ever on the movie? Did you ever see him on the movie? Was he just on the record?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never watched that movie in its entirety of all the acts.
I can't recall seeing him on the
but
movie.
apparently he was a hit there. He was a hit.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. He was like a lot of energy. Oh, that's another thing about Johnny Winter is, you got blues guys and then you've got energy, and he's one of those guys that gave the blues a lot of life. Just clever guitar player and quite unique with his finger picking and stuff too.
Well, he used a thumb pick, didn't he?
That's it, yeah.
So is that thumb pick technique, coming from Texas? Is he a converted banjo player, do you think?
Well, he played ukulele starting out, and I was driving to see my friend in Texas, and I went through a town called Gilmer, and it said, you have now reached Gilmer, Gilmer, and I was like fascinated because that was the birthplace of Freddie King. So A, he would have been a big Freddie King fan, and B, Freddie King used those picks. So you probably would have got it from Freddie King, Hideaway. I imagine that was probably his main.
The good thing about using a thumb pick is that you've got your thumb, and obviously you've got your fingers to add any percussion extra, as opposed to just using a pick like this. But it's certainly it's certainly a technique in itself, using a thumb pick.
Oh well, you can imagine it, especially with those bluegrass players with their acoustic guitars, Doc Watson and those guys, Flats and Scruggs. But blues is a bit different. But you are right; they were clever enough to have the bass line going with their thumb and then picking with their other fingers. But yeah. No, Johnny is, and another thing too we forget is a lot of his music was just 3-piece, these guys are not mucking around when they're all they have is bass and drums.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the guitar has to do a lot more, because it's just his guitar.
So he's writing some of the songs. He's obviously doing a great job at covering some blues songs, singing, doing these solos, and all the while having all this energy and it just coming out of 3 instruments.
So who was the act that he was playing with before he made it individually as a solo artist? He was a little bit like Jimi Hendrix, doing a circuit, wasn't he? A guitar player in a band for for a couple of support guys. Well, he was a support guy for a couple of people.
Yeah, I don't know much about his early career, but he was definitely getting around a lot and loving to play and cut lots of singles. And the sound quality is pretty good. Just like Jimi Hendrix, like a lot of those guys, just working whenever they can, trying to make a living, trying to absorb as much as they can. And he was just one of the lucky ones, fortunate, right place, right time. I mean, being signed to a major label, wow, you're getting major promotion, aren't you?
So that was his defining point, getting signed to Columbia. That was his big push.
I think so, yeah. Because I think Stevie Ray Vaughan, when he got signed to Epic in 81 or 82, he'd been playing professionally since 72. It took him 10 years to get a break. So a lot of these guys, they've got to work pretty hard before they get signed. And some of them will never get a break, and they're really good.
Well, I'm reading a biography at the moment on Stevie Ray Vaughan, and he was playing in the late 60s. You got to remember that. Stevie Ray Vaughan just didn't start in 1982, but with Double Trouble, and record that album. He'd been playing for over 10 years, man. Well over 10 years.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And once again, a little bit like Johnny Winter. it just so happened he was playing at the where was it? The Rockoplast. Was it the what's that blues festival in Jackson Browne was there, and they talked to David Bowie, and David Bowie talked to this guy, and Mick Jagger was there, and
Montreux.
That's it, Switzerland, yeah. So that's all it took was someone talking to somebody, and that somebody's father was John Hammond from Epic, and boom. Wow. Jackson Browne loaned him some studio time in Los Angeles for, I think, no more than 2 days.
That was their set.
Yeah. So yeah, and these Texas guys worked hard. They worked really hard. And if you think about it, these record companies are always on the search, as shallow as they are, for catchy songs. Johnny Winter and Stevie Ray Vaughan didn't really have catchy songs. They had a very strong, defining body of work. So they took a chance with these guys. Well, but because of their talent and because people's natural love of the blues and rock, I imagine they got past.
I've asked Simon this question a few times in relation to live music in the UK, and I'll ask you this same question too. So in the UK, there's been a long history and tradition of live music, of going out to a pub or to a club somewhere. Clearly in the 60s, you know, people were going out at lunchtime even, you know, to watch a live act, you know, during their lunchtime. They'd go and watch the Beatles, for example, at the Cavern Club. So you spent a bit of time in Texas. So going out watching a live band, that's a big thing. People do that.
Well, it's definitely a well, in Austin, you're fortunate where live bands played every night.
So going
Blue
out
Monday.
So going out's just part of the scene, part of what you do in Texas.
Oh, absolutely. You go out and food's so cheap. You go to a restaurant, beer's cheap. Some of the places have no cover charge. You just got some of the bands are so good, but they're surviving on tips. They have a tip jar at the stage. So, but people, it's called seeing a show. That's what they call it, seeing a show. And people go out and see these acts, and you'll have Reggae Night Tuesday, Blue Monday. You'll have, when my dad visited me, we just went to some random places and saw mind-blowing music. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
And a reggae band, white guys, a place called the Flamingo. And they were just on point. We couldn't believe it. So your Johnny Winters and Stevie Ray Vaughans would have been doing that all the time. Stevie Ray Vaughan, there was a famous bar called Rome Inn. So they have what's called a house band too.
Sure.
Some of these guys would have been the house band. The Fabulous Thunderbirds was the house band at Antone. So if Albert Collins, Otis Rush, Buddy Guy came to town, they didn't need to bring their band. The Thunderbirds were the house band.
Wow.
Which means they were the rhythm section. So, we don't have that in Hamilton, unfortunately. But pockets of America with big populations and everything's concentrated, you're fortunate.
Yeah, well, it's definitely definitely an interesting situation here in New Zealand where we haven't had a very big popular tradition of going out watching bands in this country. Maybe on a Friday or a Saturday, you'd go to the pub and get pissed and watch a band, but people never went out on a Monday to have a couple of drinks and watch a band here in New Zealand. It's unheard of. But Eric Clapton, Peter Green, John Mayall, these guys in London were playing at clubs on Monday nights and Sunday nights. You know, they had an audience. You know, and clearly, you know, you had the same situation in North America. Obviously, it's a population thing too, Carl.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I remember driving to see something on a Tuesday in the depths of winter in Hamilton, and it was a cold night, and just nothing was happening.
No.
Nothing. That's why I left.
Nothing. I remember going to watch gigs too. I remember going to the Glenview on a Thursday to watch a band, and there was 5 people there, and it's like, and the band was good. It was a good band. Yeah. Just
but even in Austin, you'd still have these great bands that only be 10 people, 20 people in the audience. I mean, these are working bands. These guys are really trying to get a break. People forget that Stevie Ray Vaughan, I think a couple of years before he got signed, was still playing to 50 people in an audience.
So Arvin's making a comment here. He gets the impression that they know good music when they hear it in Texas, like New Zealand and the UK. Well, yeah, I think, clearly that's one of the great things about the blues and rock and roll, is that you can be halfway around the world and it sounds good.
Yeah. Well, I think you're fortunate in America because there's so many bands and so many different cultures. It's only natural to be a fan of some good music because it's just always around. I think in New Zealand we have to search a bit more. We don't have the exposure. So, I mean, a lot of these guys, like just reading about Johnny Winter, his father was a professional musician. They had what's called Saturday night fish fries, church functions. America's really, what I like about America, and we don't have it here, unfortunately, is they love entertainment. And it doesn't have to be music, it can be anything. Barbecues, cookouts, church functions. I mean, you watch the movies, there's always something going, drag racing, cars. They're just really...
Boot parties at the NFL.
yeah, tailgate parties, they call them, yeah. Get really...
What do
really
they call them?
Tailgate
parties.
Yeah. They have that. They have hot sauce festivals and Cajun festivals, and just really neat. I don't know what's in the air or something, but my dad loved it. Just really, I guess, an embrace of cultures.
Can I just give you a bit of a side detour? So I have a guy coming in to give me a hand at work, and his name's Paul Trenwith. And Paul Trenwith is the founding member of a bluegrass band here, guys in the chat, called the Hamilton County Bluegrass Band. And they started the band up here in the late 1960s. Anyway, to cut a long story short, Paul Trenwith, the banjo player, comes to work, and he's loaned me a banjo. So I've picked it up, and so I try and play a bit of 3-finger Earl Scruggs and also a bit of clawhammer banjo. And anyway, Paul's traveled the world. He's been to a lot of bluegrass festivals over in the States and country festivals in Australia. And what's really interesting is that he's been to the Appalachian Mountains with a couple of people. They've gone to out of their way to show him the authenticity of people living in these areas. And it's really amazing because playing music is such a big deal. It's a big deal for a lot of these people. They may only know 2 or 3 rolls with the banjo, but Dad will sit there all night playing 2 or 3 rolls, and he might only know 3 chords. And that's what they do, Carl. Music and eating is a big part of what they do. So singing together and playing together is just part of life.
Oh, absolutely. It would have come back from that Scotch-Irish immigrants with the fiddle, the banjo, which they call over there. Oh, sorry, yeah, in Europe they call it the violin. But what's the difference between a violin and a fiddle?
Don't know. It's a fiddle. Well, and I'll just give you another little interesting tidbit too that Paul told me. So he went to watch this couple play, and the guy that was giving him the tour said to him that the guy that they're visiting hasn't left beyond 20 miles of the cabin that they're going to. He hasn't been more than 20 miles since he was born.
Yep. Wow. Yeah. That's all they know. See, a lot of these people, we obviously talk about blacks and cotton picking, and a lot of people don't realize a lot of these white people were sharecroppers and farmers and stuff.
Yep.
They were dirt poor. So music was a form of happiness as far as to forget about their struggles. Line dancing, Texas two-step, very Irish, very Celtic, dancing in a circle, church hymns, bluegrass hymns.
Drinking.
What's that? Lead Bellies did all those songs about John Henry and all these folk songs about stories, mythical figures.
Yep.
There's almost like spoken word and stories and campfires,
Well, John Henry killing a girl,
Yeah. So Johnny Winter and those guys would have just been seeped into all that culture. So it was only natural for them to not only play, because that's why I'm happy I've got this Johnny Winter album. He does all these standards, it's not only blues, it's everything. It's almost like the American songbook. So, a lot of surf guitar and instrumentals and Little Richard. And so it goes to show you that in Clarence Gatemouth Brown, we forget about him, another Texas guy. In order for these guys, Ray Charles, in order for these guys to be busy, they would have to know a lot of different styles of music. Cajun, rock, gospel, R&B, Jimi Hendrix, classic example.
Mm-hmm.
Blues was all that was their love, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But, they could do R&B and soul. So, and that's all part of America. The population, the cultures, the entertainment.
Was Johnny Winter big in the UK?
Not sure. I'm not sure. I know that he is well liked in Europe, so I imagine he would probably been big in the UK then.
So it would have been the same kind of blue collar guys translated from America to Europe, the bikers kind of.
Yeah. Blue jeans, white t-shirt, boots, black boots, mechanics, trade guys, blues guys, love it, probably, not I wouldn't say gangs, but definitely guys that, petrol heads, bikers, possibly gangs, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah. No, so he had an interesting career. Broke out Columbia, and then kept going. And I'm glad you mentioned the Rolling Stones, because I didn't realize he did all those songs. But then now I remember he did Stray Cat Blues, Jumping Jack Flash, and then later on, it was his dream from a kid to work with Muddy Waters, and he got his chance.
So tell us. So give us some background on how that happened.
Well, I own 2 of the albums. I don't know. I'd love to. I actually should research it. I just got a funny feeling that it was just a meeting of heavyweights. But what he did was he basically got some really hot musicians, kept Muddy's musicians, got some guest musicians, and they redid all those old songs and did a great job. So it was almost like Muddy Waters got a second wave of fans because of Johnny Winter. Because a lot of those people from Woodstock would have gone on. Then, there'd be 1969, that'd have been 23. 1980 comes around, 11 years later, 34 years old.
Wow.
So you had a whole bunch of university kids getting back into the blues, and that would have helped with Johnny Winter, those 3 albums. It was 3, wasn't it? Blue Sky.
Wow.
3 albums, I think he did, with Blue Sky was the label. And then obviously we know that Eric Clapton kind of jumped on in with the tour with Muddy Waters at that time too, didn't he?
Yeah. I'm just so 74, because Winter obviously dreamed of playing with Muddy Waters. Who wouldn't? who who wouldn't? So 74, he got his chance to hook up with them. Now, did he produced that album, didn't he? Hard Again.
Yeah. Organised all the songs. Probably, it was a bit like Keith Richards with Chuck Berry's 60th birthday. Similar sort of scene, set up. Let's get these guys. We know they play, we know they've done great songs and they tour all the time, but let's get them back on wax. Let's get them all together. Let's get them, hopefully, amongst a different audience.
So when that album came out, apparently it was well received. The fans loved it, and the critics too. Obviously, we gotta pay them some respect, because they're important as far as getting units out there, aren't they?
Well, they got 4 stars.
Hey, Kubrick lover.
I mean, yeah, they got some good ratings, reviews for sure. I kind of wish I had the 3rd one. I own 2 out of the 3. I really like them. And I own a Johnny Winter album in the early 80s. I've forgotten what it's called. And he does an amazing version of that Jimmy Rogers song that Gary Moore did as well. Walking by Myself.
Yeah.
Unbelievable version. So, yeah.
I'm just trying to work out what I just got some information here. I'm just trying to dig deep. So did Muddy have any issues with Johnny producing the album? Was he open to that move?
Yeah, Muddy's relationship with musicians, I think he let everybody else do the work. Like Willie Dixon was obviously the A&R man who did a lot of songwriting, producing. I think Muddy was just happy to play. So it would be natural for Muddy just to say, Johnny Winter, this is your project, go ahead. And I can imagine Muddy would have had a deep respect for Johnny's playing, because when I saw Johnny Winter play, I was like, this ain't no ordinary guitar player. This guy is a real gem.
So Kubrick Lover's saying that he saw either Edgar or Johnny in concert with Rick Derringer, whichever of the 2 brothers is alive right now. So it's Edgar is the one that's alive. So he would have seen Edgar.
Yeah.
So Rick Derringer was really popular there for a while too, wasn't he?
Yeah, they were all some of the Johnny Winter's bands. He inherited rhythm sections from other bands, and so he was always around good musicians too, always. So he's probably so good he didn't want no slouches with him.
So what's the famous song, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo?
Yeah. And then Edgar did a famous song called Frankenstein or something like that.
Yeah.
It was a famous song, catchy song. And he looked even more weird than Johnny. And he had that white keyboard, didn't he? Wrapped around his...
Wow. That's interesting. Multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah.
Yeah, Frankenstein. Yep.
Is that it? Yeah. And so when you have a couple of songs like that, you can just tour off the back of those songs. And then him being a blues lover, he can just play his blues songs. Everyone wins. And he was also famous for his he played some really little guitars. You seen those?
Oh yeah. With no heads. Yeah. Some yeah. Eddie Van Halen's played a version of them. Bloody, what are they called? Stein. Oh
wow, funny looking things. And here's a skinny little guy, this little guitar, and what comes out of it's just unbelievable. And he was also famous for he had pretty cool tattoos.
Yeah, he made tattoos cool before they became cool.
I think so. Those tattoos look really cool.
Stars and
there was a dragon,
moonbeams and dragons.
With fire breathing, something was going on. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know much about the behind the scenes part of those albums. I do know that they were a big deal, and if you think about it, yourself, Simon, and I've talked about this. That funny axis of 78 to 82 of almost a revival of good music again. Rockabilly, rock, blues. It was another generation doing some good things. So you would have been a little bit older than me, possibly in the record store, and there's those Johnny Winter albums. Yeah. Oh, wow, look at that thing. It's kind of like a Chinese tattoo. Look at that funny guitar. I don't think he bench presses much.
Just hold on for a second. Hold on, mate. I just had some background shit going on there.
Okay.
So these that weird. Is that going to focus?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about those guitars thing.
Well, obviously, because he's such a small framed guy, obviously they were perfect for him. Because once again, he's one of those guys that probably did a 2-hour show. So
when you saw him in Texas, how long was the show? Because he would have been a little bit older then, eh?
I saw him in about 2001 or 2002. So that would have been 18. He died in 2014. He was still old and frail. He was sitting down a lot.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask. So was he, because there was a period there where most of his gigs were he was sitting down.
Yeah. He sat down, and I think my sister's coming. I might have to leave.
It's okay. I've just made the epiphany. One of the reasons why he's went to that smaller guitar is because of his health. Because that Firebird would have been a heavy guitar.
Oh, absolutely. Carter's got a friend across the street.
Okay.
Hi, Carter. Hi. I bet he's going.
All right. Okay. All right. So Carl's got a family.
What's your name?
Catch you later. Thanks for the show.
Yeah. Hey. So next week, it's entirely up to you. Johnny Winter is a pretty brief topic, really.
Sure.
In the sense that he's important, but both you and I acknowledge him, but we don't know a whole lot about him. But what do you think for next week? Duane Allman?
Love to.
Or what's his name? Billy Gibbons? Maybe Duane Allman.
Duane Allman sounds great.
Okay. And then hopefully Simon will be on board too.
Okay. Cheers.
I see ya.
Cheers,
Bye.
guys.
See ya.
Hey, Arvin and Kubrick, thank you for joining us. I don't know where Simon is. This bloody daylight saving. I'm just checking my messages. So, Simon, where are you? Simon. The show has ended. He's probably slept in, but that's okay. Yeah, I'm wondering where Simon is too. Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer because he's probably going to get up knowing Simon and think that we're going to go live. But anyway, thanks for joining us. I look forward to the chat that we're going to have next week with Duane Allman. And obviously, the Allman Brothers Band, important. I first heard of Duane Allman through the Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs album. My first love was Eric Clapton, and if you're listening to that album, you can't sidestep Duane Allman. Yeah, where are you? Andrew, where are you and what time is it? Okay, so I'm in New Zealand, Kubrick lover, and it's 6:48 p.m. Sunday evening. Yeah, Arvin, always appreciate the support, and give us a message if you ever want to jump on and be part of a chat that we're doing. Let us know. The chat's open to any one of you guys if you want to jump in. I'll give you my email address, or if we're Facebook, if we're on Facebook, you can send me a message and I'll send you a link. The invitation's always open to anybody to contribute to a chat. So keep that in mind, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us.